One of the very first quilt designs that caught my eye was the Tumbling Blocks quilt. I thought it was super cool, but boy, have I been afraid to try those Y seams, and as a matter of fact, I still am. We won't do them today. Let's get started. Let's not be afraid of Y seams our entire life, but we're just not going to tackle them today. I'm still a very beginning quilter with a lot of experience. How's that sound? What we're going to use today to create the Tumbling Blocks quilt is some basic strips and a 60-degree triangle ruler. And I have to tell you, thank you to all of the other educators out there. I spent a lot of time on the internet looking at everybody else's approaches to how to make Tumbling Blocks quilts. And I saw a couple different artists putting strips together to create a very three-dimensional tumbling blocks, and I thought terrific. So I wanted to give you an approach that way, but we're going to use a pre-cut today. I have a Toscana fabric by Northcott. It's a really cool fabric line. If you look here at the gray version, you can see it's very modeled, very light, so it reads like a solid. Now this particular 2.5 inch wide strip, we're going to use the whole darn thing, but one of the keys to it is it actually only has one of each color. So there's 40 different colors in here, and as a matter of fact, every time I touch this thing, it gets all over me, so I'm just going to kind of load myself up so I'm ready for the rest of the day. That way I am properly quilted, right? Okay, so we don't have to worry about the fuzz anymore. We got that out of the way. I want you to get about 4 yards of your neutral or your background, the gray. I used it in all of the strips. I used it in the binding. I used it on the borders and all of the backing. And of course, you just need one of these. Now, with the fact that we have one of these, we're also going to be making pairs of strips. So our first thing we're going to do before we cut it is we're going to organize it by our colors. A lot of times, when I teach workshops, I find folks get very concerned when I start talking color theory. So please raise your right hand if you're like me and you have failed color theory at home. Okay, all of you are probably sitting out there, at least most of you, with your hands up. That's awesome. I don't know a thing about color theory, so I say, but what I will say is I have a strong opinion and I know what I like. Now, what I want you to do today is just look through your strip pack as you unpack it, and we're going to choose 13 fabrics for each family. The light family, the medium family, and the dark family. And in this project, it's all relative. So, for example, this one here is a very light blue. So I'm going to build it there for now. And later on, I'm going to find that this one right here is obviously much darker, so that's going to be a dark blue. Maybe somewhere in the middle, I'll call this one the medium blue. I'm going to go through all of the colors, the purples, the greens, the blues, the pinks, and do this with all of my strips so that I have 13 light, 13 medium, and 13 dark. And funny enough, I think this is the one color that I did actually end up leaving out on my project because I had 40 pieces and you only need 39. I said you'd use the whole thing, and I guess I was fibbing a little bit, wasn't I? Now, I want to show you how to construct. So let's get this color management out of the way. I want you to remember, do your best. Colors are only relative to each other, okay? Now, in order to build these, I am going to grab one light, one medium, and one dark from that pile, and I'm really trying to keep the saturation levels the same. Let me show you in the quilt. Up in this area, I have the lightest of my lights, the lightest of my mediums, and the lightest of my darks. Down in the very bottom corner, you may not even be able to see it, but down in here, I'm going to have the darkest of the lights, the darkest of the mediums, and the darkest of the darks. So they're going to travel in saturation like that together. So what you're looking at right here are the three last, my darkest fabrics, but I have my dark, I have my medium, and I have my light all represented. I need 22-inch long strips of these so that I can have 2 strips for each color because I need to work in pairs. So I'm going to quickly stack these up so that that folded end is right there. Then I'm just going to use a little ruler and a rotary cutter, and I'm going to trim about 1/8 or 1/4 inch off. I'm just cutting the folds out of everything. Yep, I did. I cut all the folds out of everything so that I now have 2 of each color. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to these. Oh, and I forgot to point out, there is a printable in the description below that'll show you how to follow this sorting as well. So let's call this fabric real quick A. So I'm going to set A here. I'm going to set the other half of A aside for now. Now I'm going to put B here. I'm going to put B in a second pile there. I'm going to put C here, right? And I'm going to take C and build a new pile. With C, I had one left over A, it comes right back. And if you look carefully, you have 3 sets on the table, all from those strips, and you have companions. And then what we're going to do, I pre-cut down some of that yardage into 1-inch wide strips of my gray. So I'm going to now join in here a gray strip between the 2 colors, and all of my sewing is going to happen from this top straight edge. That way we have a really good clean starting point, and we're going to sew down this way. Let me show you here at the machine. Oh, and before I run over there, I'm going to start my iron getting nice and hot, because we want to do a really good job when we're sewing our straight lines, especially if we're going to be cutting them with a triangle. Later on, we want to make sure that we get all of our lines really nicely sewn and pressed. So let's get our iron hot. We're going to go right sides together here. It doesn't matter which one you start on. And when I used a pinked or a hills and valleys, if you don't know that term, pinked, these edges are pre-cut. I include that pre-cut edge up in my seam allowance. You can do a back stitch, but we're going to cut it off in a second anyways. We're going to make triangles, remember? So I'm going to sew 1 strip here. And I've got a nice even pace. I'm just guiding those. I'm looking at both strips going against that seam guide together nicely. And the ends down here at the selvages may or may not line up. It's okay. We're going to have leftovers. And maybe look behind me over my left shoulder here while I'm sewing and look at the quilt. See those borders? The leftovers are used in the borders. And I'll talk to you on how to make those today too. Now, one of the keys though to good craftsmanship in quilting is to take the time to press after each seam. So as I bring this over to my ironing station, I have the right side still together. I'm going to come in here with a hot iron, and I'm going to start to lift on that little gray strip. I'm putting the bed of the iron up against that thread, and then I'm just going to push it right over. Just like that. Now I'm going to grab the other fabric that was meant for this strip. I'm going to stitch it on as well. And go ahead and do that for all of your piles. You'll have 13 different piles, build them all out. And then we can go back and we're going to do our cutting of our triangles. Okay, so then again, I would come to the ironing board. I have the new added on piece up there, so I'm going to do the exact same technique. But as we cut and build our triangles for the actual tumbling block units, what I want to do is I want to keep working all from the same families. So instead of taking the time right now to sew together the last of my dark families, let's go ahead and just organize these up for later. We can always sew those back together. And let's go ahead and grab one of our other family groupings so that you can see this all come together, right? This will be fun. I like this one a lot because I like that bright green in there. Now, I just safety pinned them together to get them through the TSA security checkpoint. I tell you, they love my suitcase when I come through. We're going to cut these one at a time now, okay? I don't want you to try to cut these all at the same time. Accuracy is pretty important in this project. It's not complicated, but accuracy does really help. Okay, so the first thing I want to do now is whenever I'm cutting with my triangle ruler, is I'm looking at a couple of different things. First of all, I want my tip of my ruler up along the tip up here, but any of these lines I can see, I want them running as parallel as possible to the seam allowances I've created, right? So I've got a seam allowance here, and if this strip is constructed correctly, or at least the way my seam allowance works, right down here at the bottom is basically 5 1/4 inches. And that's important to know because we might need some gray strips for our border later. Those would also be that same width, which for me is 5 1/4. Now, the first cut I'm going to make right now is I'm going to slice right off of here from that edge. I want you to get 4 triangles out of each family set. If you are comfortable with your left hand, you can flip this over. I'm not real comfortable, so I'm going to do it anyways and try, go real slow, like yay. And then what would be easier is if I bring this way and then keep my other cuts. Now, I am flipping the triangle over, you probably noticed, and again, I'm lining the short point up there because I want these triangles to be as accurate as possible. And what we're going for, please, is we need 2 different triangles. So a light green tip, a dark blue tip there, as you see. And just to speed things up, to build the actual tumbling block unit, you're going to need 1 of each structure from each strip. So I need those 2 for that family. I need 2 more here, so let's just cut these nice and quick, go over some of the rules, look at your lines, cut straight, cut safe. Spin your pieces, right? Move your work, not your ladder. No, I'm kidding. You know I used to work construction. They sure like to tease you if they know you're a quilter. Oh, the job site, I'll tell you what. Oh, and another thing, don't do what I was doing. I had my triangles below the strips I was cutting. I had no idea what I was cutting through. That was not good management. And as I said earlier, looking at those borders, you want to save these and leave that angle on there. You can see where I'm going with that. Okay, and here's our last strip. So let's get this cut real quick. And then I'm going to show you the magic of the way these come together. Okay, so those of you who are really nervous about that left-handed cut, we just do it this way. And anytime I've moved my ruler or template, I always take a second to really realign. And sewing these triangles together is really easy as well. Super fun. Okay, like I said, I've got my border side set aside. I have 2 of each of the triangles, and now we need to build the blocks. I don't have a great recipe for which the dark side or the light side or the medium side goes to, because as you can see with this particular square, I've got my darkest and my lightest together. But what I can tell you is I need the common colors to touch. So if this is the dark on that side, then I'm going to bring this dark over here to touch. Now I bring this blue in to touch that blue. It's one touch, 2 of the same colors touching, then 2 of the same colors touching. Okay, so then I have to get, because those 2 blues are touching, I'm going to get my green out here to touch now. Okay, now that those 2 greens have touched, I'm going for the dark blue. The dark blue comes around, and then the last one would be that fill in. So I probably explained that in about the most complicated manner possible. But what we're looking for is that box in a box, and when you're looking at these on the table, they're really on point like this. So that's what you're looking at right there. And please go ahead and take the time to put in all of your rows, all of your triangles in your quilt as you go, because when we build our construction, we're not actually sewing in this direction to put them together, but we're going to build columns. So in the middle of the quilt is probably the easiest way for you to see, but there's a long seam allowance that comes right through those, right? So all of these are built in these wonderful long skinny strips, so we're just mounting together the sides of the triangles. Before I show you how to sew them, let's talk about the all over layout here too, real quick, because this quilt can really change sizes easy within the amount of yardage. I did 3, we're going to call them hexagons at the moment because they really are hexagons. 1, 2, 3. And then I dropped the next one. This one and this one are the same. I dropped it right over here. 1, 2, 3. So it's like 3 and a stagger 3. You could have gone 4 and a stagger 4 and it would have been more of a square quilt. I played with that as well. But I wanted to show you these fun borders. So there's a couple more little things we did on the side. So this was the completed hexagon here. And this was the completed hexagon here. So I had a couple of pieces left over that I was able to use here to carry the color, but that's where I dropped in that gray piece. That's why knowing that 5 1/4 was important. So I could actually make straight gray triangles to fill in the sides so that I had the look of the point. On my graph paper, I really liked this point to come together because I thought the 3-dimensionality really came together fun. So do all of your design work so that you can make your sewing really, really simple. Now, back to what I was saying. This here is that major seam allowance of the columns we're going to put together. So if I was sewing 2 of these triangles together right here, I am simply going to look at the way they match up. I'm going to flip them right sides together. Okay, and I'm going to go right over to my sewing machine. For me, it's that really cool skinny gray strip that helps bring that three-dimensionality together. So as I'm approaching the machine, I'm going ahead and I'm just marrying those little seams or nesting those seams together like that. You're on the bias, so I don't want you to push or pull, and please do lock your seams together for these. It makes life so much easier. We're going to sew with an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance through there. And then my method was to go ahead and to cut that. I would return over to my board. I would press it like yay. And then I drop it back into where it was in the column, and I grab my next triangle, I lay it on here like this. I'm double checking my seams in there to make sure those grays look great. And then again, I'm going to my sewing machine. I have a real strong feel for trying to keep the body or the bulk of the quilt on the feed dogs. So if you noticed, I flipped this over so that the new piece is the piece on top. It keeps the lighter weight that way and allows my feed dogs to do my work when I'm doing this bias sewing. Okay, so your construction is just really wonderful. Straight lines as you go through the rest of the quilt. It's a very enjoyable process, and I have to say I'm incredibly excited about the way that the whole 3-dimension look came together. Now, I want to give you a few more moments of instruction on the borders before I let you go to your sewing rooms today. So let's see, it might be easiest if you can see it right over here next to my dear friend Jerry Garcia. In the borders, I tried to keep the colors similar to each other in the location. A couple of the border pieces are some of the leftover strips from the colors I was using, and one of them is an all new color introduction. I want to say that maybe this color down here isn't seen in the rest of the quilt. It was another strip I made but didn't fall into my layout. So I really did use almost everything when it comes to that 2.5 inch wide pre-cut packet. But anyways, as you look through here, oh gosh, that's going to be confusing. Let's look at it like this, gang. Let's just move this and make it real easy for you all to understand at home. As I was using my scrap pieces, I also had some scraps that were left over from those 1-inch strips. So to make it all consistent, what I really did is I took my first strip I stitch on here, I'm going to do it really raw or loose because I'm dealing with this when I flip this open. I'm going to have this new seam allowance direction. So what I'm doing for this one is I'm going to leave it long, I'm going to go to the machine, and I'm going to sew this on real quick. It's kind of like my slice-a-block trick, but this one we're going to want to be a little more accurate because we want those strips to be the same width on the borders. So as that's made like that, I would press it. Then after it's been pressed, I want to trim it so I know where to line up for the next time. So I come here. I'm using the outside edge, but I'm also looking at that inside line because every time I can make sure I'm cutting as square and straight as possible, the more chances of having a accurate looking quilt when I'm done. Notice that I said chances. I'll tell you though, I've been making quilts like mad this last couple years, and my accuracy is definitely improving with each project I do. Okay, so let's get this last piece on for you here. Now this is going to come together just like this, and I will tell you the first time I did it, I missed it. This is a hard seam for me to always remember. What it really is when we start to fold this over, it's like it cheats. If I line it up perfect, edge to edge, you might not even be able to see that gray on the cutting board, sorry about that. But if I line those tips up perfect, when it opens, it's off by 1/4. So I have had to learn to kind of cheat about 1/4 inch in both directions. Now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch this together. While I'm doing this, if you would say a quick prayer for me that it comes out nicely, I would really appreciate that. Because I'm trying to remember exactly how I did this, and I think it was the 1/4 inch cheat that I did. Again, don't pull on these because they're on the bias. Let it go through nice and even. and amen, and let's see how it worked. So we lay it open. Oh yes, and if I hit that with an iron, it would actually look terrific. So that is the work, and yes, it's that 1/4 inch sheet that will make those line up. And then all you have to do is just cut them into the right length so that you can position them to fill in the 2 sides of your super cool 3D tumbling blocks quilt. Wow. Okay, now I thought that was going to be an easy one, and it really is easy construction, but there were a lot of steps, so just take it slow. That's why we love YouTube here. You can hit pause, you can hit rewind, and as a matter of fact, you know what I'd love to hear from all of you? I would like to hear in the comments below today, what was the first quilt pattern you fell in love with, but were also afraid to try? And we will see you next time right here at Man Sewing. Thanks for being a Man Sewing fan. It's great to have you out there encouraging me to create fantastic new content. If you've missed any of the videos, we've got links for you here and here. And while you're checking those out, make sure you're subscribed. We don't want you to miss any of the action.